our story on mysteries today began over 20 years ago. It was the story we did on the 70-foot shaft. And we've gone back to visit the 70-foot shaft again just recently. But first I need to give you an overview on the story to begin with. Sometime over 20 years ago, a fellow named Jim Hatt, a friend of mine, approached me to go into the mountains, and he needed help doing something. He didn't say what it was, and I agreed, except he had one horse, and I didn't have any horse at the time. So I asked him if it was all right if I got a friend to go along who had 2 or 3 horses, and that was Hank Brown. And he knew who Hank was, had worked with us many times at the Superstition Museum, and he agreed. So we left Government Wells about mid-morning and went about 30 minutes due east and took off on a uncharted, no trail whatsoever. We were trailblazing all the way in. And there were no landmarks that would be able to tell somebody where to start to go into where this place was, because nobody's going to find this by accident. You got to know exactly where it is. And I might just add Government Wells, in case you don't know, is located north of Apache Junction on State Route 88, just before you get into the switchbacks. And this is where 200 Pima Indians were headquartered when they started to build Apache Trail in 1903. And Jim Hatt was, he had worked for nuclear energy companies. He worked at 3 Mile Island, and he moved out here to work at Palo Verde so he could hunt for the Lost Dutchman gold mine. And then he quit his job at Palo Verde and found a job out here in Apache Junction at Government Wells as a caretaker, because the land was leased to some people who had a couple of gold mines there, and they had shaker tables and all kinds of equipment at Government Wells to process gold. And he was the caretaker living on the grounds. So as a caretaker at Government Wells, this gave Jim plenty of time to search for the Lost Dutchman Mine, because he only really needed to be there at night to be security. And of course his wife was there also. So anyway, we finally got in there, and in the most unusual place you could think of, which I'll save for a little bit later, we found this pipe iron head frame underneath a hole in the ground that went 70 feet deep. And this was our first trip in, and Jim had taken, just to reconnoiter what we might need. And he took some string along and measured the depth of the hole, and we saw that the boat winch that they were using to lower the cable with barrels on it to get the earth out and stuff like that was very rusted and stuff. So we reconnoitered the area and went back and came at a later date, and we brought a can of WD-40 and stuff like that, and we oiled everything up and got everything working real good, and we lowered Jim down in the bottom of this 70-foot hole. And that was what it was all about. And I always wanted to go back in there with some good photography, because we were on a mission. We weren't there to look for anything. We were there to get Jim down that hole and back out and go home. It's an interesting place. So on the way back, we went a different route than the trailblazing that we went in. And we run across a landmark that would have been easy, that if anybody knew where that landmark was how to tell them how to get to this 70-foot shaft. Well, you know, when I was 81, about 5 years ago, going on 6 years ago, the film crew and I took a trek into the lost mine that we found. And I took a bad spill down the mountain, and I was beat up. So I didn't break any bones, but I blew my knee out, and I was cut up pretty bad. and I had to have Dave help me out of the mountains. I was hanging onto his backpack all the way out. And about a week or so later, I had a stroke. And I made about a 95% recovery on that. Still a little weak in one hand. If I pick something up and don't think about it, I could drop it, you know. But I made a pretty good recovery. And so to go back in, I'm out of the picture. I've made my last trip into the mountains on that particular hike. And so the film crew was going in, but Dave didn't know where this landmark was. And we found a fellow Dutch hunter, hiker, guy that had spent a lot of time in the mountains that knew where this landmark was. And he agreed to guide Dave and the film crew in there. So our guide doesn't want to be on the media. He wants to be anonymous, so we won't mention any names, but he went in alone before, and when he got very close to where he was supposed to be, he lost the GPS signal and he wasn't able to find it. So I took a Google Earth picture and I took it to Photoshop and I drew a route on how to get there. So when they went back in with Dave, they were able to go pretty much directly to it without too much of trouble. But they discovered a lot of things that I hadn't seen on our trips because, like I said, we were on a mission to do something. We weren't exploring. And they done a lot of exploring, and there's some very interesting things we're going to share with you. All right, Dave, I'd have gave anything to be on this trip. And you told me some amazing things you guys run across. So why don't you had time to explore when we didn't. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, that is true. We were there just only to explore. We weren't crazy enough to go down that hole. Oh my gosh. But I have to tell you, it was beautiful going in there. And there's no trails. It's back in the middle of nowhere. It's beautiful country, and there's all kinds of symbols and signs that you think would be clues for the Dutchman mine. And we were looking around for it, trying to find it. We had your pinpoint. We supposedly knew right where it was, and we were at the bottom of a hill, and we look up and we see one of those hole in the rocks, those little eyes looking at us. And let's walk towards that and see if we can find it up there. We walk up there, we get up there, and there's a kind of a dog's head and an eye, and we get up there, it's gone. It's just gone. We couldn't find it. I mean, the dog's head rock is still there, but the eye of the needle or whatever that's supposed to be, that was just gone. We could not figure out how in the world we could see light through that rock when you were up there next to it. There is no way to do that. So we sat there frustrated for a minute, and we looked over to the next ridge, and I'm talking about on a cliff. You guys are crazy. On a cliff, we look over there, and there is that metal frame that I remember from the first video we did. And he goes, there we go, that's it. I go, what, really? No, that can't be it. And I looked at it again, and sure enough, there's that tripod. So we hiked down the ridge and back up the ridge, and it's steep. I mean, going up there, it's not easy to get up to it. And we got up there, and when we walked by that down below from the lower part of the canyon, we didn't see it. I saw something blew up on the ridge for a second. I go, what was that? And then I didn't see it again. But we got up there and looking around, and that shaft just goes straight down, and it's on the edge of a cliff. You could sit up there for years and no one would ever see you going by. So if there ever was a military trail there, that would work. You know what I'm saying? And there's all kinds of peaks around there that look like the Peralta map or the Ruth map. I mean, it's just like, if you're looking for symbols to make that be the Lost Dutchman Mine, that's pretty close. But I am not a geologist, but I've been enough around these stories to know that there's no mineralization there. There's nothing that would hold gold, in my opinion. There's cracks in the rock. Maybe that's what they were after. Maybe they found something on the surface. I don't know. But I have no clue what they're doing and coming in was, my guy kept saying, there's the two pillars. And I go, Yeah, I saw those back in the last valley too, and they're in this one. And then look down there, there's some more. I mean, there are definitely 2 pillars from the maps everywhere around there. And when we saw that one eye that we walked towards, I looked over straight out that way, and there was another eye. And I looked over that way, and there was another one. It was amazing. It's like there was clues everywhere. So if you're following clues, it made sense. But we got up there, and it made no sense. There was no mineralization. Up on a cliff, they basically started digging the hole and filling the area out so they had a place to even stand up there. But to my surprise, that A-frame that they put up there was still in place. And one of the things that was really surprising to me is it was still solid. I leaned on it, dropped the camera down there. It was amazing. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. It was, I mean, I don't know what they're going for, but you guys are crazy to go down there. I wouldn't go down there.
And the boat winch was gone, wasn't it?
Yeah, the boat winch was no longer there. And I have to admit, I did kind of stage a shot because there was 2 buckets they're using to pull the gravel out on the winch up underneath the ledge, and I pulled it out and put it in front of the tripod just to get a cool picture. Okay. You know, I put it back where it was at. But while I'm standing up there, I look down, and I see stuff down there, but I really can't make out what it is at the bottom of the cliff. And I told the guide, I said, you know, we probably got to go back that way maybe, or we'll go look at those holes that we saw in the rocks on the way up. But we went that way, and we went down there, and there was stuff littered everywhere. There was cans and more barrels for lifting ore. There was another winch that they'd probably used and just threw it off the cliff. There was more cans down there. But the most amazing thing to me is when we got further down, all the way down to the flat, down at the bottom, there was a rickshaw set up with some old wheels on it. It looked like it was perfect to put 2 of those little metal cans on there and you know, walk ore out. Yeah. Or maybe they use it to bring stuff in, I'm not sure. But it was hidden up underneath the rock. It wasn't even close to the mine. But we were assuming that's part of that. And also they had a wire running across, so kind of a safety wire that was still there. Everything was still solid. I mean, it was amazing. Everything was still rock solid. I don't know how long ago that was built, but it's still pretty solid. And no one's taking anything away. There's all kinds of artifacts and food cans and everything all over the place. Yeah. I mean, it's very obvious.
Yeah.
What year were you up there?
Oh, I don't know, 20 some years ago. Okay. I don't know. I don't remember. Okay. So you didn't think this was a place that the average guy would, or even a knowledgeable guy, would be digging a hole in the ground, huh?
No. No, and talk about horrible logistics. Oh my gosh. It would be so hard to get stuff up there because you have to scale a cliff to get up on that little tiny ledge.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, I had a copy of the Holmes manuscript, and Holmes had actually tried to follow the Dutchman into the mountains one time, Holmes Sr. Uh-huh. And he said that the Dutchman stayed on the north side of the river the whole way. And that meant that he was entering the mountains from the north, where he had given clues from coming in from the south where the board house was and stuff. But I got to thinking about all these things you described, the pillars and the head and the profile map and all that kind of stuff. If you came in from the north, from the lake that wasn't there at the time, of a canyon lake, then the most logical place you would come in is where the military came in on LaBarge, which is the second bridge that you get to, where all the boats are stored on the north side. Right. There's that inlet that goes south. That's where you start up LaBarge Canyon. And if you started down LaBarge Canyon, and when you came to that first tributary canyon that goes off to the west, you wouldn't have passed the Three Red Hills, which was a clue. Oh. Now, coming from the south, you wouldn't want to pass the Three Red Hills, but going in from the north, you wouldn't want to pass the Three Red Hills. And then you take this tributary canyon, and you run across those 2 pillars you were talking about.
Absolutely.
And then the dog's head with the eye, which is kind of what's on the profile map. And from the hole in the ground, if you climbed up just a little bit, you could see Weaver's Needle, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
you could.
okay. So you can understand how these people could misinterpret or interpret the clues from an opposite direction and end up digging a hole where they thought, where no miner would think to look for a mine.
That's for sure.
And the only other conclusion I came to is they dug that hole 70 foot straight down, but if they'd went to the bottom of the cliff and dug in 10 feet, they'd have been in the same place.
That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Well, folks, that kind of wraps up our story, and that's just another mystery of the Superstition Mountains.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.